Welcome back to the Disrupt Education Podcast. Ellie Privet,
Peter,
something
host
that
loser.
yeah, right. Something that I noticed. So now on my Facebook, since you have become an elite skydiver trainer person, all I see is like your friends, like one friend, like we're connected by, and every single one of them are jumping out of planes. I don't know. You got cool friends on Facebook.
I I do like a growing network of skydiving friends, which it is funny because Facebook has like evolved so much, and what it shows you real, and they want you on the app is like what's going to keep you on. It's like all the reels and like all the groups are skydiving related currently.
Right.
Uh, but thinking that's actually interesting, like segue, because I thinking about Facebook started when I was like in college.
Hmm.
And when I started college, I wanted to be a dentist and I was pre-dental for a very long time. Life has evolved, but I have that background in training. Like I was the president of the American Student Dental Association for 2 years, and our guest today has a relationship in the dental occupation, that field. And so it was kind of like in preparing for this podcast, I was kind of reminiscing of that time and and in the simpler times in life when you were like trying to figure out what you were gonna do.
Hmm.
I still feel that way, but I don't know, it's like nostalgic and it feels different when you're 18, 19, 20 than when you're a bit older.
Yeah,
So,
well, we can kind of dive into that because she's an amazing person. Let me throw some of the accomplishments out there. 15-year CTE teacher in the dental occupations cluster, Pennsylvania licensed dental hygienist, the recipient of the 2023 Carl J. Schaefer Memorial Award, HOSA's Future Healthcare Professionals, the Pennsylvania Advisor of the Year Award, professor at Temple University for other CTE teachers. And we like to also promote other podcasts. The podcast at Ambitious
mhm,
she was a recent guest there late last year, I believe.
Mhm.
Cindy Midget, how are you?
I'm very good. Thank you for having me.
Did we miss anything there? There's a lot.
You have not. I'm also a certified dental assistant and I'm a public health dental hygienist as well. So I like to serve in those roles as much as I can when I can.
Well, let's start out with the thank you for that and talk about like your story. Like, how did you get into dentistry, and then how did that kind of make its way into kind of the CTE world?
Yeah, so great question. When I was young and I got out of high school, I honestly did not really know what I wanted to do. Um, in high school, I didn't really have a counselor that directed me. I was middle of the road, right? I wasn't top of the class and I wasn't the bottom. So I was never a problem, very easy, but no one really counseled me on anything. But I had a girlfriend, she was going to go to school for nursing, and I thought, oh, I'm not sure I want to be a nurse. I don't want to draw blood, but I liked the thought of healthcare. So my dentist, my personal dentist, talked to me about going to dental hygiene school. So I thought, well, my community college has it. I can afford it. And off I went. And then it turned out that I loved it. I really did enjoy the profession a lot. So I left, I passed my boards, and I worked for 18 years full-time in dentistry. Dentistry is rough on the body. And it was getting hard. I was getting some carpal tunnel, things like that. But I so loved the profession. I had a passion for dentistry and the patient. And I thought, what am I going to do here? I don't know if I'm going to be able to keep going. So I started kind of looking for things outside of the op. And somebody told me about teaching in career and technical education. The largest tech school in the East Coast had an opening for a dental occupations teacher. I thought, what do I have to lose? I applied. And at that time you had to also go back and teach. So I taught a lesson. I was brought back for a second one. I taught a lesson about blood pressure. Everything went very well, and remarkably they chose me with no teaching experience, and I had no teaching certs. So in career and technical education, you have to have so many years in your industry and certain licenses and certifications, right? If you meet those requirements, they bring you in, and then you go and get your teaching certifications. You have so many years to fulfill that. So that's what I did. And lo and behold, 15 years later, I'm still here. I took a break for 1 year and I worked at Harcum College, which is a dental hygiene, EFTA, and assisting program. And I helped them out for a year. They needed an associate professor, which when I did it, I wasn't sure, but I'm so happy I did it because it really taught me a lot. We have a lot of articulation agreements with colleges, so I got to be on the other side and see what that CTE student was like when they took advantage of the articulation. I also tutored there, which, really gave me another perspective on teaching a student. So that was awesome. Then I went to my current school, and I've been there for about 5 years. 2 years ago, Temple University had approached me and asked if I would consider teaching in their CTE center. So I thought, well, let's give it a try. When I went back to school for my teaching certs, my experience was probably not the best. And I had always thought to myself, why can't you give me things that are going to make me better in the classroom, a better manager, a better, differentiate things for students, help me understand their needs. So I thought, well, if I can get in this role, maybe I can serve that. I can do that. So that's what I chose to do. And adults is a whole nother kind of frustration and rewarding piece than kids are. But I definitely love teenagers. Like that is my happy place is with the teenagers. So that's kind of the journey. And then the awards came this year, which was fantastic. And hopefully this momentum keeps going.
Yeah. Awesome.
So when you were going, kind of that transition period, and I love that you kind of figured out your path as you went and questioned it, and it has evolved and changed. And it's almost come full circle in a non-traditional way in the education space, right? Like you went into a full career and then you came back to educate. But what did you notice, in that transition from being a practitioner to teaching in that capacity? Like what, if you can kind of put yourself back in that time frame, what kind of what differences did you notice and in what you needed to know or be able to do, and maybe some of the stuff that in your actual career that maybe helped you in that transition to teaching what you've been practicing?
So definitely what helped me in the transition was you have to have a lot of empathy, right? In dentistry, people are afraid, and you have to give them a comfortable, safe space to tell you what's going on, to accept treatment, right? And feel comfortable there. The dentist comes in and tells the patient they need all of these things. And the patient nods their head and leaves the room and looks at you and says, do I have to get this? I'm afraid of the needle, right? So you need empathy. You need the ability to give comfort to someone in a non-technical way so that they want to come back, right? So that translated into teaching very well. Students need a safe space. No one's going to ask a question if they're afraid. So that empathy, that ability to relate, give comfort, and create safety was probably the biggest transfer. You would think it would be my technical knowledge, right? I'm filled with it. But what I did learn after first week or two, when I thought, oh, I'm going to tell these kids about the joy of dentistry. I'm going to infuse this love, and they're going to all want to be dentists. Yeah, that's not the case. I gave an entire lecture about the mouth. I thought it was fantastic. I felt great. And a student, I said, does anybody have any questions? And a student, the only brave one, right, raised their hand and said, can you tell me what the oral cavity is? Because I used the word oral cavity. I didn't say mouth. And in my brain, all these bells went off. You just did an entire lecture with technical vocabulary. You thought it was great, and nobody even knew oral cavity. That means they never got past that. And it was an eye-opening moment how far down you have to break your knowledge when you are teaching someone new. Everything to me that seems like they should know it, they don't. And you have to get all the way down to the bottom to bring them to the top. And that was a huge lesson, a huge lesson.
I remember that's high school right there, right?
Oh.
No one's going to say anything. And I love that. That's such a great Because then in my mind, as you said that, I'm like, what's the oral cavity? Is there like is it a cavity? Is it like I did not know that was just the mouth. So that's a
Right.
great
But as a professional of 18 years, that was just old hat to me, right? That's what
right.
it is.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because you think as an industry person, you're going to come into CTE and give them your stories, right?
Right.
And you're going to instill a love. And what they really need to know is start me at the basic level, get me to an entry level position. That's
Right.
what they need. And
Yeah.
that's what you learn over time.
So it's something interesting because you know, when we connected with your husband and that's Ken Midget, by the way, go back to that awesome podcast. And then he mentioned that you were in the dental occupations cluster and then CTE, right? I
Mhm.
think people don't understand CTE all the way, and we'll go way deep into that. But right now, like CTE, a lot of people will just assume it's a trade, you know,
Mhm.
plumbing, carpentry, and that's the only CTE. Can you kind
Yeah.
of explain like a little bit more to people? Like CTE is more than that.
Right. So CT is massive. There are all different clusters, of course. So you have the hard trades, what everyone assumes is going to be there is
Mhm.
there. But you also have the healthcare trades, you have the IT, the computer trades, you have the engineering trades. All of those things are there as well, because even not every trade is going to require a college education, right? And
Mhm.
some are going to give you different tiers that you can go. You can go right out of school and work. You can go on to college. You can go into apprenticeship. So there's all these pathways. So even a pre-engineering classroom is going to be a pathway, right, to something on the lower rung of that industry, some kind of an entry level position.
Mm.
So all of these trades that are in CTE schools are going to provide that entry level position to the student. And then the student can determine, am I going to go further with this? When students come into our CTE labs, no matter what they are, even in the skilled trades, the hard trades that we would consider, we want to know their pathway. Do you want to own a business one day? Do you want to go to college? What are your desires? And then we tailor that program, and we're constantly revisiting that every year. In CTE, we have this great benefit where we have those students 2 hours and 20 minutes a day, 3 years in a row. The relationship you build and the way you give feedback and the way you can continue to remake their pathway is so fantastic. So a carpentry student, they're going to go out and they're going to start an entry level position, but that doesn't mean they don't want to own their own business or they don't want to be a cabinet maker. So they still have a ladder to climb, right? We're just getting them out there.
Mhm.
And same for me. I'm going to put the student out to work, but that doesn't mean they're not going to go to college. So I'm always revisiting, because if they say to me as a senior, listen, I'm going to be a dentist, right? And that's a long road.
Mhm.
I immediately know I need to put you in an office with a dentist that's going to write your letter of recommendation, that's going to give you the hours, that's going to open the doors at the dental school you want to go to. So where do you want to go? I want to go to Pitt. My brain starts to work. How many dentists do I know? Did they go to Pitt, right? And I plant that seed because I have to cater to what the student would like to do.
Mhm.
So I am in a constant revision process with them. And that's kind of how CTE opens the doors. No matter what they're in, we are trying to figure out what is the pathway after high school. I know they're done with me, but I'm still opening the doors if I can, even beyond that graduation point.
Love it.
There is such a power in having someone like you who's like a great coordinator, it sounds like, and really trying to open doors, because so much of life is connections and you know, and conversations. And this summer series, we are kicking it off and we're trying to put it around this idea of like being relentless in your pursuit. And just
Yes.
hearing you talk, I can hear, you know, your kind of passion in what you're doing currently that comes from years of technical like work in the field, but then now it becoming in 15 years in the teaching space makes you a master, in my mind, an expert level
Mhm.
of how to teach and then connect people. and seeing like, oh, if this student mentions this, this is how I can help them even beyond what they are trying to do in that moment. So with where you're at right now, how do you, like, how would you kind of showcase, the relentless aspect of pursuing the CTE kind of role or work for students, right? Like, because it's different. And some people you're talking about the dentist being scary. For some people, CTE is scary. So how do you kind of, get kids seeing how this can really be beneficial and jumpstart so much more, or just walk us through anything that kind of came to mind in what I was saying there.
So I will say having the 15 years serves me because I have a lot of past students, right? And I have a lot of connections now. It took a few years to get there. But when the students come into me, we talk a lot about what they can do in this field, as all my fellow teachers do. And then I try to connect them with past students. So I often have my past students come in, my students that are already in dental school, my students that are in undergrad, my students that are hygiene students, my students that are working as hygiene. I bring them in, or I do, kind of like Skypes or Zooms, right?
Mhm.
To talk about that pathway and how they got there. Also, one of the things I do a lot of is because I have so many students that are in hygiene school, hygiene students need patients, right? They need so many live patients.
Mhm.
I will connect my current students to my hygiene students. So when they go in and are a live patient for a former student, they then show them around the lab. They introduce them to the professors. They show them their textbooks. So I am trying to get them to see the possibilities. Because when they first come to me, many of them come to me because their counselors maybe feel they're not college material, right? Or maybe, you're not very good at school, so I'm going to send you here because you're going to get to use your hands. 100% accurate. But they are good at school. They're just not good at connection. They learn about modes of elasticity in physics or a basic science class. Then they come to me and they learn about orthodontics and they learn about how braces work. And all of a sudden, modes of elasticity is snapping, snapping, snapping. And they say, oh my God, I know exactly what you're talking about. And they gain confidence. So when they first come to me and we start talking about their career pathways, I spend a lot of time trying to build confidence in them. This is what you know, and this is how it applies. And look at you doing it. So we talk a lot about that. We also talk a lot about failure and how it makes you successful. So just because you didn't do well in your bio class doesn't mean you don't understand biology. It means you need to work on biology. Maybe you need to take it again and apply it. So I spend a lot of time confident building, because most of my students in year one will tell you that they're not going to go to college. They're not college material. They want to work out in the field. I 100% respect it, but you're college material. You just haven't been given that feeling that you are smart enough yet. So I'm going to do that for you. And I'm going to use former students. I'm going to use OAC members who are going to come in and do projects with them. So when another adult that isn't me comes in and says, listen, we're going to do a public health project. We're going to work with a daycare and I'm going to show you how it's done. And they build the project and they present the project with that member. That's a huge confidence builder. When I take them to CTSO events where they're going to compete against their peers, they're competing against 38 kids. My student took second place in dental assisting. She's going to Texas. When she didn't take first, she took second, but you would have thought that she just won the lottery. Like,
Yeah.
she didn't want to walk up. She's like, I can't believe it's me. I'm like, that's your name. You got to go on to the stage. Like, the confidence that creates is what builds those connections and then makes them not afraid to go out to the dentist office, call someone on the phone and say, can I shadow with you? But they've never felt that before. And they get that from me. And kids teenagers, you've worked with them. Sometimes they make really poor choices, right?
Sometimes.
A terrible decision. And I say, okay, that was a bad decision, but that doesn't define you. Where do
Right.
we go from here? And when
Mhm.
they figure out that they can still move forward after that, they really start to buy in. So
Mhm.
buying into that classroom and to yourself is what I want to do. So I do a lot of things to create that atmosphere.
Yeah. Um, I've got so many questions. This is awesome. I love this discussion.
Thank you.
If you all need to listen to this twice, I'm just going to start there. My first question I want to ask is, what do you see in the future of like CTE? You mentioned the person, I was going to ask you this question before, but you kind of mentioned the person who's like in biology or they were learning something and it didn't connect. And then once they got into an experience
Mhm.
where it was interacting, do you see a future where more of that is coming into the classroom and or like the classroom is going out before they even start going down these paths? Because I see that as something tangible math, tangible science, those types of things, I think actually have made an impression on myself when I was growing up, but I know have made an impression on students. How do you view future school? What is 5 years from now, Cindy? What would you like to see in a high
What
school?
oh gosh, what I would love to see. I would love it to not be so in the box, right? I have to work within the box. And on my box is actually a little bigger than a lot of my academic counterparts. But how I would really like to see it is I think that students should be able to come in an independent fashion. So you drive, right? You're going to come and see me so many days a week, and I'm going to put you out in an internship, externship, however you want to phrase that, much quicker. Right now, I'm teaching you for 2 years, and then I'm getting you out in the summer of your junior year, and then you're working in your co-op in your senior year. I think these experiences, and in 5 years from now, this is what I think will happen. These student experiences will start happening in year one. So in year one, they should not be spending 5 days with me, right? They should be spending so much time with me, learning the concept, applying the concept, and then they should at least be out 1 day a week practicing these concepts. And maybe it is not just in dentistry, right? So maybe one of your experiences is you're going to go out to a nursing home and you're going to work on communication, right? So you're going to volunteer for 1 day, and your job is going to be, you're going to meet as many people as you can, and you're going to take a small survey about their brushing habits. That's what you're going to do for my 3-hour class. And you're going to bring that information back, and we're going to take that data and we're going to talk about it, and we're going to decide what public health measure can we create for you. And this is happening already early on. Of course, AI, we all know that's coming in. I think that'll be a bigger part of CTE spaces. CTE teachers spend a lot of their time creating simulations, right? Wouldn't it be great if we could have something help create that simulation? And now we are just involving the student in it. We're facilitating all the pathways of, here is your case study or your simulation of your patient. Now tell us where we're going to go. Here's your legal case study. Now tell us where we're going to go. So I think that AI is going to come in and help us with preparing these things so that we can have richer discussions and richer facilitation when we are face to face.
Love that.
Did you have a second question, Peter?
No, I do, but it's on the teacher side. So we'll go there in a minute. I know, like, would this have helped you become or not become a dentist, Allie? I don't know, because you were in that realm. I don't know.
I mean, like, I think I've talked about this a little bit before on the podcast, but like Cindy mentioned at the beginning, I had people kind of, encouraging me on things to do, but there were a lot of fields that I didn't even know existed. Like I've said, if I could go back and redo things, I think I would have been an engineer of some kind, but I didn't even know an engineer existed. Really, like that wasn't a popular career choice when I was going through high school. It wasn't, never saw one. I mean, maybe I'd heard of like, people who design bridges and think, oh, you're some kind of like civil architect. I don't know.
Right.
Like,
you're a bridge builder. That's common.
right? Like, and I was like, oh, but I look at things now and think, oh, like that problem solving aspect is, a skill set that was underdeveloped through the
Mhm.
school system.
Right.
Mhm.
And it's interesting to think, which pathway maybe I would have gone. I actually considered later post college, like nursing or teaching.
Mhm.
And I very distinctly remember going and touring the nursing school and them showing this simulated esque area where you had these kind of robotic bodies that would be sick or do something, but there would be a person behind creating the scenarios as what
Mm.
you're kind of speaking to.
Mhm.
And so I wonder now what the nursing school, if that is more simulated so that the person running it isn't also evaluating it, or they can, maybe more situations can come up. Because I know as a teacher, as to your point, so much time is spent on the creating portion, and that would be done in the breaks because it's so mentally, it's exhausting to be creating.
Mhm.
And it's amazing, but it is when you have all the other technical parts of your job and detailed parts of your job, it can be a hard place to get to. So I love this vision of AI, or just enriching technology, in one to show students more options, and also to free up you as the educator, to kind of really be more of a connector and having more conversations, which is what you got at the beginning, right? That's such a cool part of your role. So when when I'm hearing you talk about CTE, and a lot of people have this in mind, and I mean, even being in the public school setting, so many people think of CTE as, oh, like it's for quote unquote, like the kids aren't aren't what, like, I mean,
They're not
whatever label you want to put.
academics. They don't
They're
consider it
not, yes.
academics, right?
Mhm.
So academic. So, like, what would you say to those listening? Like, because we have such a variety of listeners, but like, what would you say to like kind of rebrand CTE in your
Mm.
experience, right? Like, what could help people see that like this is a path for exploration? Because in the question that Peter kind of asked, like, had I had those kind of opportunities, I maybe would have picked a different path. So for me, the rebranding would be like, it's for everybody, and it's a way to explore and tinker and play when you're young before you have to make a quote unquote decision that's going to cost you years and time and lots of money and resources. Right. But like, what would you say?
That's a big
How would you
tagline right there. I like.
brand? What would you say to like help people envision CTE differently?
First of all, CTE needs a brander, don't we? We need some
Yep.
marketing.
Yes.
Because that is the perception. And I can talk, I actually present in all over the state a lot, talk about CTE connections, and I'm hoping to present in Texas at the end of the year at the ACTE conference.
Mhm.
But when I can present this over and over, guidance counselors come to the school, we present to them. Administrators of middle schools and high schools come and we present to them. So we talk exactly what you're talking about, how it is for everybody, how it is teaching them a skill. The truth is, if a student comes to me for 3 years and they graduate and they say, listen, I don't want to be a dental hygienist, I want to be a radiologist, I want to be a nurse. I have still given them a marketable skill
Yep.
that they can fall back on over and over and over. And what an amazing thing that is to give every high school student. We are transitioning teenagers to young adults, and many of them are leaving high school with not a clue. But if you come to a career and technical center, even for 1 year, you're going to get a marketable skill. So I'm going to say CTE is going to enrich the life of every student that graduates, which, by the way, the graduation rate of CTE students is higher than the average. Okay, so that's a fact. They're going to be enriched because they're going to learn a marketable skill. They might start out on that skill and change, but they
Mhm.
always have it. And if they don't change, they are now ahead of all their peers because they have certs that their peers are going to have to go into college and get. So they're going to start at a higher income level, right? My students, when they go to college, they already have their radiology license for the country. They are with peers that now have to take a course and pass that. My kids don't. So if they choose to stay, they are further ahead of their peers, right? And because they are in a CTE school with teachers who are connected to these college professors, because they serve on my board and I serve on theirs. Now they already know, I know what they need to be successful before they even fill out the application, which, by the way, when you're accepted into dental hygiene school, the acceptance packet is 85 pages long. There's approximately 47 checkoff items you have to do before you get in there. Imagine handing that to a kid who has no support.
Yeah.
Who comes out of high school with no clue, says, I'm going to go to college, gets accepted because they had a great GPA, right? They had a great GPA, and they're handed this packet, and never in their life has someone taught them how to handle that. Yeah. My kids are not going to be those kids because they're learning it, because I'm not just teaching them a skill. I'm also teaching them how to be young adults, right? I'm teaching them autonomy. I'm teaching them confidence. I'm teaching them how to speak to another adult and not look at your phone, right? And they love their phone, but they're learning that with me as well because the employers are asking for it. So if I want them to be marketable to the employer, I have to teach to that aspect as well.
Wonderfully put. I'm go back into my own path. I go into a lot of other students' paths. There's a lot of blockers in a lot of public schools. I think Allie and I have talked about those, but I think a lot of those walls are coming down. You've kind of shared, what you're doing. So I have a few questions about the teaching part of it, right? So I'm in Illinois, and we are just, for at least the internship programs, not actually being a specialist like you are in the dental clusters, occupations cluster, but we find people like that. It's not always intertwined just yet in every state, but I have to get a work-based learners certification or whatever, something added on to my, so, it's a class to teach you how to teach the class, right? Which I have, and we have to go through it and all that. But let's go deeper into that, right? CTE certifications to teach, right? I'm very interested in what does it look like in your classroom at the university when you're working with CTE teachers? What is Pennsylvania doing? What do you see as a trend nationwide that is going in that route? Because I know you said it before the podcast, and I was literally just talking to somebody last week at one of our professional developments. They're just letting anybody teach if they can hammer a nail into a wall. And I'm like, maybe some states are, but I don't think so. So yeah, kind of unpack that if you don't mind, Cindy.
Yeah, I think that is a huge misconception. Pennsylvania is somewhat of a model state, but there are a lot of states like mine. So you have to have so many years in your profession, and you have to have so many certifications or licenses to even apply. Once you come in, you have to get your teaching certifications. There are 2 certifications. You come in on an emergency permit, right? You get a year on that, and then you have to start your first cert. There are 2 certs you have to get to teach. In Pennsylvania, it's divided in the country, so it can be IUP, it can be Temple University. It depends where your geographic location is. You are required to go to that college. So there is no choice there. However, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Those colleges, have been working to help. If you're a welder, you know how to weld, right? But teaching is a different profession. It's an art, it's a science. So you need to learn how to go from being a professional welder to being a professional teacher with a specialty in welding. So someone has to unpack that for you. And that's what your certification programs do. They unpack the pedagogy of teaching, right? How does a learner learn? How do you manage a classroom? The first class they put you in is literally, how do you manage a classroom? If you come out of industry, you might have managed 10 adults, but you've never managed 57 high school students, right?
Herding cats.
So with all these diverse learning needs, and
Mhm.
you don't even realize they're diverse. You think everyone's going to learn the same. Of course, you quickly figure out they're not.
Mhm.
So these teaching certification programs kind of unpack all of that piece. The students are required to, the adult students are required to do portfolios. So they have evidence of their teaching. They have to present those portfolios twice in order to move on in their certification journeys. So when I teach them, I am preparing them for those types of portfolio presentations, their presentations of their lesson plans, how they played out, all of their reflections, and I'm teaching them all the standards that they're going to be kind of graded on, or graded is probably not the right word. They're going to be reviewed on by their administrative professionals. So they're learning all of those pieces. And once they complete that and they pass those things, then they'll get their final teaching cert and they're done. And then they can choose to go on. You can actually get your master's in vocational education if you chose. You don't have to. You can transfer those credits somewhere else. I know that I went on to get a bachelor's in dental hygiene education, so I could keep it in the dental family. But then, of course, I did my master's of ed. So you can choose to transfer them anywhere. But they have approximately 9 years, and it's about 60. I want to say now it's about 68 credits that they have to take to get both of their teaching certs. So it is rigorous, right? It's not always enjoyable. Imagine, I am going to tell you about, this is what I did learn about CT in interviewing hundreds of people to come into it. A lot of times people in industry think this is going to be their retirement profession, right? So I have been a plumber all my life and, it's hard on the body. I'm 52. I'm going to come in and teach kids what I know. But what they don't understand is you have to teach them the right way, not the way you may have cut the corners in your profession, right? Because dentists we all do it, right? We get used to our profession and we get better at it. So now it's not happening that way. So somebody has to teach you how to start from the beginning. But teachers get in there and they don't realize what going back to school is, and they struggle. When you ask me to write something, I'm not going to struggle as much as when you ask a guy who's been welding for 18 years. He hasn't written anything in years. Has he read a lot of technical journals? Absolutely. But has he ever had to summarize one? Probably not. So, you're kind of going back to basics with them so that if they know how to write, now they know what to look for in a student, right? How should the student write? Because our students are writing. Our carpentry students, they're writing. And when they get in there and they realize that they're going to read a technical article and they're going to break it down and they're going to explain it to somebody else, sometimes they don't want to be there because their guidance counselor said, hey, you don't like to read and write, you can always go here. And that's not happening. So we fulfill those academic requirements because Pennsylvania requires us to apply these academic standards. So in the teaching program, we're teaching these academic standards. When you're teaching fractions, this is the standard you're teaching academically, and this is the standard you're teaching in the career and technical education standards.
It's such an equivalency and so much more. It's like to me, CT is like such a no-brainer. But there aren't as many robust programs as there need to be. And that, in my opinion, is one of the biggest reasons why it's like a deficit, right? There aren't enough slots for, I think, the number of students who would want to, just across the country as a whole. I'm sure there are areas that have these really awesome programs like yours, but not that our area in St. Louis where I used to teach had a career and technical college, had like two big ones kind of on the north and south side, but that was for all the high schools, right? And the application, there was an application process and a busing requirement, and some school districts were like, no, we're not going to partner with you, or so there was it was challenging where it should be, I think, more integrated. But hearing you talk about just the route that you've gone on, and then even recognizing, like more areas you can grow in your field, to me, is like we're having a summer where we're showcasing people who are relentless in their pursuit. And Cindy, you 100% qualify because like some people, what we found, and I myself included, have had summers where we're like relaxing, kicking back, and teachers, it's a common time to take a break. And while that is important, breaks are important. I don't want to say they're not.
Right.
What does it look like to turn it up into high gear and really pursue your passion in what you do? And I just, the way you're speaking about the work that you do, it just totally comes across as like you will find a way for the students and the people that you're teaching to make whatever their career path happen. And not everyone, I think, is as lucky to like work with someone like you, because there is so much power in instilling in young people. And Peter and I know that from, it could be one conversation that totally changed the trajectory of someone's route. So is there anything you would say, you know, like you obviously found your passion in what you do. What would you say, maybe say to a young person or even a teacher who's like, maybe they haven't found their passion? Like, what does it feel like to do the work that you're doing and really love it and pursue it at the level that you are pursuing, to encourage people this summer?
So I'm going to say
What would you
this,
say?
not everybody is going to work at the pace in which I do, right? So I enjoy working at this pace because when I was a hygienist, I always wanted to work at the top of my license. These are all the things you can do, and I was going to do them, right? And as a teacher, I want to work at the top of my license. And that's who I am internally. So I can't give drive and passion to another person, right? You have to want that. But in education, we as teachers are often felt like we are in constraints, right? We have administrative teams. They have all these things they want us to do. They ask us to do things they don't like, which I would like to say I have been very lucky, and I've had good administrators in my 15 years that have been encouraging, but not everyone is in that boat. So I think some of my passion comes from being always given the yes. How can we help you? So administrators, try the yes for a while. When you start allowing people, when you say, how do you want to develop yourself? And I'm going to say yes to as much as I can. It is amazing how people will explode with creativity when they don't feel the constraint. But that doesn't stop the constraints that are there. So whenever I do anything, I think about it in two ways. Number one, what can I control in this situation? There's a whole pile of things I can't control, but every single aspect I can control, I'm going to. That's number one. Number two, I constantly think about how I affect others with my interaction. And I think that way because it's very easy when things are not going right for me to say, well, that student never brings their textbook. That my administrator won't let me leave at 15 minutes early for this, right? It's very easy to say that. It's very easy to blame someone else when the situation is rough. So I always think to myself, how did I affect the person in this interaction? And when I speak to other adults in my classroom, in my colleagues and my students, before I speak, I think, how do I want this person to feel or be affected by me? Because if everybody thought like that, it would be a different space, right? And I get a better response from students because I look at them like that. You're right. She never brings her textbook. I mean, they never have a pencil. You're right. But instead of attacking someone on that principle or saying, well, the reason why you're not learning is because of A, B, C, D, and it could be true. It could be true. I still think about how can I control this situation and how can I create an interaction that person will want to work with me versus be defensive or against the situation. So that's kind of how I put myself out there, so to speak.
There you go. Love that, Cindy. That's to a T right there. That's disrupting education, to be honest. That's, I think, what all innovative and risk-taking educators do. You're not going to go wrong with that concept. And I love that you shared that so eloquently. Before we grab your information to connect with, are we missing anything? Is there anything else? I mean, this could probably be a series, Allie. But is there something else that you're leaving out there? You're like, hey, here's a last thought. I usually give it to Allie, but she already kind of gave her final thought. So I'm going to give it to you, Cindy. Your final thought on education, CTE, and wrapping this up.
I'm going to give you, this is my last thought on career and technical education. And anybody who needs to know, here you go. If you want your child or you want a student to have a dynamic, in the weeds, hands-on education, you need to put them in CTE. Just in my school, and they're everywhere, right? There's hundreds and hundreds of CTE schools. My school alone, students got patented last year for something they made for the Academy of Natural Sciences in Philadelphia. Students in my classroom and in my school just did $20,000 in philanthropy grants where they created the mission, right? They gave the money out. They're getting 20,000 more next year. Students in my school created all of these art objects in the welding and the auto body lab that are going to go all around the city of Doylestown, right? Students in my lab are out helping in Special Olympics. Students are doing blood drives. They're doing all these rich experiences woven into an academic space. So if you want your child to have a rich experience, if you as a teenager want to maximize your high school career, you need to come into a CTE space because those opportunities are already there because we are required to build them in by the Department of Ed, right? So they're there. So bring that child in. Allow those, get past the stigma of it being a 1950s only auto body hard trade, which those trades are so important, but move past what you think it is and allow the shadowing of your child. Allow your child just to come in for a couple days. You would be amazed at the changes that happen. And parents say it to me over and over. I feel it's because they're here that they are doing this. And you're probably right because they finally feel personal success. So if that's what you want, you need to take a student into a career and technical education space because you're not going to get it in a lot of other places.
I think she just rebranded CTE there, Allie.
Frame this up and make a commercial.
Bingo. Thank you so much, Cindy, for sharing everything. If people want to reach out, I'm going to guess some of our listeners are going to want to reach out, talk a little bit about or connect with an amazing CTE educator and mentor like you. How can people reach out to you?
So of course, LinkedIn is the best place for me, Cindy Midget at LinkedIn. And then they can also, of course, reach me with all of my school social media. So I'm at Middle Bucks Institute of Technology, MBIT, and you can go right into their website and you will find me and all of my social media related to that classroom.
Excellent. We'll also post those up in the show notes. So everybody, if you want to grab those, connect. That's what we're about here, disrupting education, making new things happen. Cindy, thank you again for sharing. I know this is a long time coming, but we are just going headfirst in passion and crushing it, as Robert Peppo said in a previous episode, for the summer. And it was an amazing podcast. Everybody, you got to listen to it twice. I already gave you that challenge. So for Allie Privet, I'm Peter Hostrasser. Thanks again to Cindy Midget. We'll talk to you next time on the Disrupt Education Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us on this week's episode of the Disrupt Education Podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe so you never miss an episode.
Are you ready to disrupt the educational arena you're a part of? For more ways to get involved in the work we do here at Disrupt Education, check us out at disrupteducation.co or find us on LinkedIn at Peter Hostrasser or Allie Privet.
Our mission here is to help facilitate and amplify changes in the educational system through local initiatives and help you scale them into community movements. Our building network of disruptors in education are working to move beyond scores and grades as the only measure for student learning. If your school district, college, campus, or organization is looking for facilitators of this work, reach out on our website or social media.
And if you have any thoughts or feedback on this week's episode or any episode, we'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep pushing the boundaries, taking risks, and most importantly, disrupting education.